My name is Heather McIntyre, and I come as myself, as a concerned citizen. However, I do actually contribute to the Central Australian Frack-Free Alliance.
Thank you.
Okay. So basically, I also come on the basis that I've been here in Alice Springs since 1974, and made my home here and raised a family here and had a number of incarnations as far as career goes. So, and part of that is about I've travelled to all aspects of the territory from 1974 up until more recently. So having some knowledge of its vastness and its beauty and its meaning to the tourism industry, I suppose. And so so just to start off, I'd like to make a statement which is basically saying why I am here. And I'm here wanting a total ban on fracking and not an outcome of mitigating the risks of fracking while building the industry in the Northern Territory. So that's my position. So I thought I'd just make that a little bit clear. So I'm only sort of somehow touching on an aspect of, or a perspective, one perspective that I might have on about the impact of fracking in the Territory, and that is really my concern of the industrialisation of the landscape of the Territory. That's for many varied reasons, but certainly one of those is about the tourism industry in the Northern Territory, given that over the decades that I've been here, that has become probably paramount as a primary industry. Whereas in days gone past, when I first came here, it might have been a cattle industry, but now it's just one of the industries here. So I quote actually from, I suppose, the Central Australian Tourism Strategic Plan for 2017 and 18, that the NT is the pilgrimage that everybody wants to make. It remains an outback destination famous for its authenticity, its rawness, remoteness, its iconic landscapes, and most importantly, our cultural heritage, which has been maintained by Indigenous people for over 60,000 years. And hence you may have heard in the news recently that there's been 30,000 odd artefacts and paintings just discovered in Nhulunbuy. So hence we are talking about untouched landscapes here, not just the Stuart Highway. So I could talk about the impact of water. I could talk about the impact of the social life of Alice Springs and the Northern Territory, having been here for 70 years, the reasons why I came, the reasons why I stayed, and the reasons why people continue to come and make their homes here. And that's its uniqueness to anywhere else in Australia. And I suppose we could all say that even if we lived in Melbourne, Sydney or Hobart, as we all, and most of us have all come from other places. But in relation to the tourism industry, is that given its increased focus on tourism in the Territory, is that I'm wondering how we could also think about having a fracking industry, or actually not thinking about it, perhaps even moving towards it, as Jamina would like to think that they are. But and I say that because having been involved in the campaign for a couple of years now, that came about because I had just finished walking the Larapinta Trail, which is an iconic walk in the Territory of 223 kilometres. And if you haven't walked it, I'd recommend you do, if you want to see the soul of this country. And my sense is that I saw that fracking was starting to be talked about by a notice board at Stanley Chasm. So from that, I came here very angrily into town, thinking nobody's going to do this to my country. So hence so I need to make it quite clear. I am really angry also about the proposed industry, and I live on the old east side of town. I've lived there mostly since I've been here in 40-odd years. So not that I'm any official representative of the old east side, but I certainly did take part in the lock the gate type of door knocking that we did to gather statistics on how people felt about the industry coming to the Territory. So I am one of those 89% of people who do not want to have fracking in the Territory. So also we had a local representative at the time knock at my door, and this is during the NT campaign, who said, can I help you with any issues? And I'm a person who's got about 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 even yellow triangles on my front gate that talk about ban fracking. So it became clear that that was my issue, and to Dale, and she did say that it wasn't just the Old East Side, and I quote that, is that she said it's not just the Old East Side that is concerned about this. We are finding the feedback from all parts of Alice Springs is that nobody wants to have fracking. So I suppose as I came to your inquiry when it was here earlier this year and sat at a round table discussion, is that my aspect was how do you quantify and how, I don't know how you gather the facts because I'm not a scientific person, about the social impact of the fracking industry on our way of life. And my sense is, even with Esther at the end of her presentation, which I thought was excellent, and I'm so pleased that she was able to give so many facts and figures and references, but is that I think from those questions at the end is that this is a very lively debate, and it also reflects the anxiety that is amongst the community about fracking. That's, I think I could hear that and see that in Esther's questions at the end of her presentation. I myself had a business here in the 80s. We opened that business in 1981, the 1st of January, and we had it for about almost 10 years. And that was a service station business. I've drove down the South Road, now known as the Stewart Highway, probably 6 to a dozen times before the road was made. I loved it. It was iconic. I loved it. My sense is that in the late 79, after self-government, we had a new railway line implemented from South Australia, and we had a new South Road. The idea of that was to open up the Territory to tourism in 1979 odd, and it certainly did. Our business grew as a result. What we did graph over that period of time was, okay, yes, it was the increase in business, and that was also through opening up the Territory is the number of visitors that came by road, because what they wanted to see was the outback. And that is what the fracking industry is going to destroy. They will. They have grown up, as one woman said to me when we had what was called the Commercial Development Corporation under the Paul Everingham government. And they were set up to be able to develop the Territory for tourism. So they thought that when the Todd Mall was rebuilt and some of our iconic buildings knocked down, they thought that was a good idea. But hence, people came and said, we're expecting to see the book that we read by Neville Shute, A Town Like Alice. Now, I'd like to think that we have progressed since then, of course, and we certainly, as a resident, would like to have things improved and be almost as progressive as everywhere else. But we don't want Queensland, we don't want Sydney, we don't want Melbourne. We actually want the Territory. That's our uniqueness that we sell. Earlier this year, I attended what they call a Northern Territory Tourism Roadshow. And what that's put on by the Tourism NT. It talks about and delivers a package about how they spent their budget last year, what were the statistics that they gained from that expenditure, where they reached, what they expect to happen. Then they take that all up the track, giving their members and local businesses an idea of what's going to happen in the next 12 months as well, because they also forecast what they're going to do in the next 12 months. I listened to that in astonishment, actually, as to how worldwide this place of the Northern Territory is being sold. I mean, that does distress me too also, the influx of people, but my sense is I'd have to say gobsmacked at its outreach in promoting the Territory as an iconic place to visit. Its remoteness, its ancient landscape, its cultural heritage is what is being promoted. they actually sent out a request as to who would be interested in learning Mandarin next year because of the expected influx of wealthy Chinese tourists. They were overcome by applicants. Obviously, it's an opportunity to be able to upgrade their skills, I suppose. But we are being sold to very wealthy Chinese people. We are being sold to very wealthy middle-class Indian people as well. Now, some of that feedback has been they're not coming here just to go from Darwin to Alice on an aeroplane or to Uluru. They want to do some self-driving, be it guided self-driving. They want to see the vast areas that we have to offer. So my sense is, I suppose, my quandary is this is like, to me, living in parallel universes. On one hand, we have this iconic area of the Northern Territory being sold as this most amazing landscape of ancient lands and ancient culture, yet we are going to somehow desecrate the land with a fracking industry. Now, I will quote you from some of the fact sheet that I offer, because in the last 2 or 3 years, since I've become aware of fracking, I've actually manned a stall down at the Todd Markets every second week so that I can inform people of what fracking is. And I would only like to inform them on facts, is my belief. So one of those things, it says that unconventional gas fields involves the industrialisation of entire landscapes, covering considerably larger areas than conventional gas fields. They generally require thousands of wells, vast networks of roads and pipelines, compressor stations, processing plants, wastewater holding dams, and treatment plants. Now, I also read this in your report last night as well, that that's what it requires. Now, I'm not sure that we can build, a 100-metre barrier from the side of the road so that we can disguise them, because we don't have lots of gum trees out there. So we're an arid land. So I suppose my passion comes from the fact that I've been here for so long. It may not be entirely factually based, but I leave that to other experts such as Esther and other people along the way. Rod Campbell, who can also give you the economic report on fracking, and a number of other people whose reports I have read. But what I can offer is my passion for this place after 44 years, so much so that I appeared in actually the Central Australian Red Centre Adventurers campaign last year or the year before, actually. So I did actually go to Mark's Camel Farm. In fact, I went twice because I was then chosen for the Tourism NT campaign to get people my age, so obviously late 50s, early 60s, to come to the Territory in, I think, what was the name of the campaign? Just Do It, I think it was. Just Do It. So had great fun, saw lots of the Territory that I hadn't seen for a few years. But what it does tell me is that there's an industry here that is going to employ far more people for a much longer period of time in tourism than it is in fracking. And fly-in, fly-out workers, I can speak to some experiences that my oldest son was a fly-in, fly-out worker in Western Australia. He has now come to his senses and has left the industry. The impact on relationship...
Was that gas or mining?
It was gas. It was building, I think, a gas well over in Barrow Island, I think. Yeah. Now, he's a young man. He's a married man now who needs to buy a house. So, but the impact on his fly-in, fly-out life was what he decided, that his relationships, his quality of life, his things that he likes to do are far more important. So what I'm saying is, I suppose I've heard that story, and it may be anecdotal evidence, but it's close to home. And he's a young man who told me when we were in Margaret River, because we drove through the great central highway that Marx talks about when they were young children, the three of them. I drove across the road, down to Bunbury with my 3 kids. And so what we admired was the landscape. What we admired was the remoteness. What we felt was
the Indigenous people of Australia still holding that space. They live on that space, they hold that space. I could only say that this industry would just be another form of colonisation, a destruction to what we've already done. And in fact, my terms is that it's rape and pillage to our country. And I suppose from that, that's my passion speaking, but I suppose statistically is that I would like to say that, again contained in this document from Central Australia Tourism, is that $2.5 billion are gained annually through tourism in the Northern Territory. At the moment, or presently, it is upwards of 15,000 people that it employs. Now, that's a number that's going to continue to go up. I don't know how many businesses in town are tourist businesses, but I'm sure somebody could tell you that. But my sense, that's only going to increase with increased tourism. And that's not just in Alice Springs, it's not just in Darwin. The track in between will also be part of the pilgrimage. And the pilgrimage will go from here and then it'll go to Western Australia, because people want the outback. People want isolation. They want to know that this was known as the lucky country because of our pioneering. And it's not about fracking, no. It's about having respect for the land, and it's about having respect for our cultures, I quite believe. So another one is, can't say I'm very good at this, so sorry, but what Central Australia Tourism has also applied to do just recently is to be recognised as one of the world's top 100 sustainable destinations. So it seems incongruent to me also that we're going to have a fracking industry at the same place, or around the same place. But anyway, is that we would therefore become, if granted, we would become the first Australian destination to be granted this honour. And the outcome of that decision will be made on the 28th of September. So I quickly looked up what that meant, and many pages to be said, but it's about sustainable living and sustainable environments, I suppose, is the very tiny synopsis. But I do have a piece of paper here that will give you the website. So really, I think that the only other thing that I would like to add to that, as far as our ancient country is concerned and our ancient landscapes, is basically, I suppose, our ancient water. The water that we drink here, that we are very grateful to have and to drink, and I must admit every time I turn the tap on I am thankful, has taken 180 million years to get here. That's how long it's taken to work itself through the rocks for us to have it. So we don't have water restrictions here. Lots of people wonder why we don't, because we live in an arid country, but we don't. So then again, it's incongruent to think that a fracking industry is going to be able to conserve any sense or source of water that is going to keep up with the $180 million years that it's going to take for us to turn the tap on and get it again. Is that my sense is, from my statistics that I've been quoted here from the mining industries themselves, is that each frack uses 15 million litres of water. Each well can be fracked 8 to 10 times. It is expected that if the 83% of the territory is therefore, which is now therefore under exploration licence, is fracked, we could have up to 60,000 wells. I don't know where our water's coming from. I did actually spend 2 years in New Zealand, actually, just to have a little change and for schooling reasons for my kids, about 10, 12 years ago. When I came back, there was a tour by the Power and Water Company of our sewer ponds, because they have a lot of really great green waste management at the sewerage ponds, which in turn attracts a lot of birds that migrate from all over the world, which then again attracts people who come to Alice Springs to see those birds. But hence, one of the things that Alan did say at the time was the reason our electricity bills went up annually was because just from domestic use in Alice Springs, our water table dropped a metre each year, and therefore they would have to get our water from an extra metre down, and that was the cost. So the cost involved was about actually getting our water from that extra metre down each year. So I'm still, perhaps I'm thick, but I don't understand how fracking is going to work with our limited water supply. I don't understand that. And the fact that you could put that under threat with the use of fracking and chemicals in that fracking process, as Esther has pointed out, and I'm sure many other people have, to put that as risk, I think, is diabolical. So I suppose I'd like to finish really now in saying that I do actually call upon the Commission to very seriously consider, and I know it is actually based on facts. I can't offer you the facts because I'm not a scientist, and I know other people have done that, but I can give you the perspective of what I feel will be the impact to the fabric of this society in the Northern Territory if fracking was to go ahead. So I just ask that you consider that very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms McIntyre, do we have any questions or comments from the panel? Yes, Dr. Anderson. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Ms McIntyre, and the panel really appreciates your passion for the deserts and concerns about people who live here and the tourist industry. And so the question I have is, how would you feel if fracking were restricted to somewhere else in the Territory where tourists don't go and where local communities were supportive of it? What thoughts be there?
Well, I don't know where tourists don't go because there's certainly a lot of, I grew up with the Leyland brothers, and there's certainly plenty of people who really still come here for that off-road experience. So in saying that, I mean, you might be talking about Beetaloo Basin up there, but I don't know in terms of tourism what that looks like. But certainly as an outback experience, there are many, many, many people who still come for an off-road experience. So I don't see that fracking anywhere would actually be desirable. And I would feel that I would be compromising. I mean, I live in Central Australia, but I would like to think that I hold the space for the whole of the Territory in talking about fracking, actually. So I wouldn't be prepared to compromise on that. And my sense is that in being on my stall, or the CAFA stall, not my stall, although I feel like I might have some ownership of it, but is that people from all around Australia come here, and a lot of those are older people, and they feel very powerless because some of those people's, where they live, their states are fracking, and they feel very powerless about it. So what the message to us is about keep up the good fight. Don't have it. I mean, Victoria has a moratorium now, great. Tasmania has a moratorium, great. We can only hope that our moratorium stands forever. But my sense around that is that, how do I feel about that? Is that there's lots of people that come here with their kids also for that outback experience because it's the iconic outback. So I had two young, gorgeous teenagers who came from Castlemaine, and they had actually recently demonstrated around a religious event that was happening down there about the mosque being built, and he was for migration. So you asked me what has to do with today. I showed him a picture of what our landscape would look like if fracking was to happen, and this is a picture of Queensland and the coal seam gas, and this is what it looks like, the landscape. And his reaction, which I'll never forget, was, my God, that scars upon the landscape, that scars upon our earth. He immediately bought an anti-fracking yellow T-shirt and said, tell me what to do. So I'm just saying also that that view of our outback is held perhaps within those younger people today. And our cultural heritage as Australians, I suppose, is part of that outback. So communities, if communities are given the full picture of information rather than perhaps a little being blindsided, if it's about just economic development and they don't know what the consequences are of possible land movement, possible water contamination, possible 1,000 deliveries of trucks or whatever, if they're given all that information and they still continue to move forward, I don't have control over that because that's their land. But my sense is I would be very surprised in some respects that given all of the information that those decisions would go forward. That's what I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Beck.
Yes, once again, thank you for your passionate articulation of the iconic nature of the Northern Territory. You've been very concerned, and perhaps rightly so, about the potential impact of tourism, the impact of the gas industry on tourism. But just firstly to acknowledge that around Alice Springs within the Amadeus Basin there is already an oil and gas industry of some 100 wells, I think at least 90 wells, some of which have been hydraulically fractured, and the tourism industry seems to be able to coexist with that level of activity. So, and appreciating that a shale gas operation could be an order of magnitude greater than what the current activity is within the Amadeus Basin. But given that there is already an example within the Northern Territory of what appears to be coexistence, then do you preclude the possibility of there being another development somewhere else away from Alice Springs where there could still be a continuation of that coexistence between the two industries?
For myself, no. For myself, I would, if we have 90 or those wells that exist now, as there has been at Mereenie, although that's conventional fracking, is that they have been, they're here. I suppose to me that would be the moratorium. They remain if that's what happens. But no, as far as going forward as a development elsewhere, no, I don't. I think that at the moment that impacts on traditional owners. It impacts on pastoralists as well. So my sense around that is that for an industry to come in and step over those people whose land it has been for 60,000 years, no, I think that that actually discounts those people. So I stand with them, with those people, in maintaining their rights, as we did with Wataka. I think Wataka was mentioned earlier today, but my sense around, I think it was last year, whereas the elders sought our help from the Central Australian Fact-Free Alliance to be able to actually stop licences. Well, there were 2 licences that were going to be granted over Wataka itself, over Kings Canyon. What they had to say was disregarded by the Giles government, and so they sought our help. So the EDO, the Environmental Development Officer, went to Canberra with them, and the Minister at the time granted the fact that the Kings Canyon would not be touched. So my sense is that this is, I suppose, as highlighted in your report, it fractures communities, those who are for and those who are against. So all I can do is stand with those people who are against fracking. So I would not contemplate it. I've left before because I said I would because of the particular government that was voted in. When they were voted out, I came back. I would do that again. My daughter at the moment is working for Track Larapinta during, she just finished uni, and she takes out people who fly in from all over Australia and other countries, and she treks the land with them. She shows them the untouched land. She has the history of the land. There are traditional owners that go out there and speak to these people. So what you're sending back to Canada and what you're sending back to America and England and other places that these people come from is Australia and its soul to me. And this is known as the heart of Australia. So I must admit, I wouldn't compromise. No, I would not.
Thank you. Sorry, you mentioned conventional fracking. What do you mean by conventional fracking?
Well, there's 2 different types of fracking, and there's the unconventional type, which is the shale gas fracking, and there's the conventional fracking. So the conventional fracking is reflected in the fact that you have the way, this is my description, is that through the information that I've sort of summarised, is that you will have a large pool of gas in rock where it's easily attainable. It's like having a lake, I describe it as. And so you will have, therefore, a well that goes directly into that gas, and that gas often comes up because of the water table underneath it might pressurise that. So you don't need toxic chemicals, and you don't need to have, 3 or 4 Ks of horizontal pipelines and then vertical and then horizontal. So basically that's how that's the difference between conventional. I could give you a pamphlet on it and can show you, but it is highlighted in your report about the differences.
There's conventional gas and unconventional gas.
Is its methodology?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I guess I'm just trying to understand where you draw the difference. And fracking is fracking.
Look, I suppose there is what's called, we've got shale fracking, which is what this inquiry is about, how to retrieve the gas that's caught up in those small pockets amongst that geological layer of shale rock, That's what we're talking. So you've got to fracture that rock, that layer, yes? Whereas unconventional, I would call conventional gas fracking is that you go directly down to the source, basically, without that fracturing methodology. Yeah.
So would it surprise you to find that there are 34 wells just in relative close proximity, although that's a relative term in itself, given the distances and the vast size of the territory near Alice Springs that have been fracked?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't, no, sorry. If you're talking about Marini, no, I'm aware of that. Yeah, I am aware of that. Conventional gas fracking, yes.
Perhaps it's just appropriate to note that, and you've distinguished conventional and unconventional wells, and normally conventional wells do not need to be fracked.
Yes.
But there are examples of formations which can either be in shale or what's called tight gas,
yes,
which do need to be fracked. And so it's not fracturing for conventional wells, it's fracturing in other geological formations which are characterised as either shale, which this particular inquiry is concerned, but there can be fracturing in tight formations which have somewhat similar characteristics to shale and are closer to shale than they are to conventional wells.
Yes.
So it is hydraulically fracturing.
Yes.
But I think the important thing for me to also to note that those fracturing operations, I think, are primarily attached to vertical wells rather than horizontally deviated wells where there are long laterals. There are differences, but we just do need to acknowledge the difference between conventional wells, which don't normally require fracturing, and fracturing in either shale or tight formations.
Yes, and I am aware of those differences. I may not have articulated that very well, but I am aware of those differences. Yes, I am aware of those differences. Yes.
All right, because there are wells in and around Alice Springs that have been fracked.
Yeah. Okay.
With chemicals.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we've got exploration licenses around here, so that's not surprising. And I can't keep up with how fast the industry moves. So, but yes, thank you for that, pointing that out.
No, that's all right. That's my confusion more than anything else.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from the panel at all, or anything else you wish to say?
No.
Thank you very much for coming today, for taking the time and the considerable effort in making your presentation. Now, I saw that you were reading from a document. Did you have a prepared written document that you were reading out from, or?
Look, I just have, I just in my own inimitable way, I just make points here and there, but I did use some documents to get some of those facts from, yes.
Right. Well, if you were amenable to this, we would certainly like to be provided with those documents. They will be then, as I said, received as a submission and put on our website. So if you do wish to provide them to the panel in that way, to inquire in that way, just give them to one of the members of the task force who's at the table.
Okay.
Behind you.
And a copy of your brochure there would be quite interesting to have too.
This one? Yeah. Okay, look, I don't have all those brochures here. I've got this one, but will I send them to you if I
No, you
collate
can just
them?
give them right there to the lady.
Yeah, but I don't have them all here, is what I mean.
Oh,
I
yes,
came
no.
straight from work, so yeah. So can I send them to you or drop
Absolutely.
them off?
No, so you can send them to us electronically, that's fine,
Oh,
or in the
okay.
mail, whatever's going to be most convenient to you, and the task force will be able to give you the details.
Okay, or I'll go back to work and get them. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think we'll be leaving here at about, I think we're going to be closing up. My understanding is that I think we have our next presenter here, is that right? We do, who's flown some considerable distance to get here.
Yes.
So we'll hear from him, and then that will be the end of today. So
All right.
if you just contact one of the task force members just behind you, and they can provide you with details as to where to send the
Okay,
information.
great. All right, thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Ms. McIntyre.
Thank you.